Willow Creek was the kind of town where time seemed to move at a different pace. Small and surrounded by towering mountains, its cobblestone streets reflected the soft glow of the old street lamps at dusk. The wooden houses with flowered porches gave the town a timeless charm, and the smell of fresh coffee always lingered in the air, coming from the small cafe that served as a gathering place for the locals. Emma grew up there and never felt the need to leave. A teacher at the local school, she saw her job not just as a profession, but as part of who she was. Her routine was simple, but filled with small moments of joy. The children running through the schoolyard, the casual meetups at the town bookstore, the morning walks by the creek that wound through the hills. Her kindness and optimism were known to everyone, making her someone who always left a trail of warmth wherever she went. Noah, on the other hand, didn't see Willow Creek the same way. To him, the town was just a relic of the past, a place he had left years ago in search of something bigger. Since he was young, he had carried the ambition of conquering the business world, and that's what he did. The fast-paced life in big cities brought him success and stability, but it also distanced him from any real connection to his roots. Now, however, he was back, not by choice but by obligation. His grandfather, one of the few ties he still had to Willow Creek, needed him. The return brought memories he would rather forget. Every corner, every old shop, every familiar face revived a time he had buried. But what bothered him most was the feeling that, despite the years, the town was still the same, while he had changed too much to ever belong there again. Fate brought Emma and Noah's paths together almost immediately. Their meeting wasn't marked by sympathy, but by a misunderstanding that placed them on opposite sides of an unexpected situation. Emma, always willing to protect what she considered important, and Noah, carrying the resistance of someone who no longer believed in roots. From that moment on, it was clear their worlds didn't fit together. But time, relentless in the way it weaves stories, still had much to unravel. That morning, Willow Creek was especially busy. The town cafe, a gathering place for the locals, was fuller than usual, with the aroma of fresh bread and hot coffee blending with the cold autumn air. Emma passed by there every day before heading to school, enjoying the quiet routine and the warmth that place represented. But that morning, something felt different. Upon entering, she noticed a man standing near the counter, examining the environment with a critical gaze, as if analyzing every detail. Tall, dressed impeccably, but with an impatient expression, he stood in stark contrast to the cozy atmosphere of the place. It was Noah. He was holding some papers in his hand, and the way he spoke to the attendant revealed a mix of frustration and indifference. Emma didn't know who he was right away, but the conversation around her soon cleared that up. Noah Reed, Mr. Reed's grandson, was back after years away, and by all accounts, he wasn't just there for a visit. There were rumors that he planned to sell the family property, which included the cafe, a key piece of the town. When Emma realized what was happening, a discomfort grew inside her. That cafe wasn't just a business. It was part of Willow Creek's history, a place that brought people together. Seeing someone treat it all like mere numbers on a paper made her stomach turn. Noah noticed her presence when he heard her firm tone as she spoke with one of the attendants. She didn't need to say much to make it clear what she thought about the situation. Her gaze, usually sweet and welcoming, now carried a trace of disapproval. For a brief moment they exchanged glances, and in that instant, it became evident that their perspectives on the place were completely opposite. To Noah, the cafe was just an old property that needed to be dealt with as soon as possible. To Emma, it was a symbol of the town, something that deserved to be preserved. The tension was set. Without exchanging a single direct word, there was already a silent conflict between them. Noah wasn't someone who liked to be challenged, and Emma wasn't someone who easily backed down when she believed in something. With one last look around, Noah left the cafe, but left behind an unsettling certainty. That was only the first of many encounters between them. Since the first tense encounter at the cafe, Emma and Noah began to bump into each other frequently. Willow Creek wasn't large, and his presence soon became a constant. At first, each interaction between them seemed to reinforce their differences. Emma saw Noah as someone disconnected from the town's reality, while he saw her as someone stuck in a past that didn't want to accept change. But gradually, the encounters stopped being merely casual. One day, Emma had to take some students on a field trip to the town's old mill, a historic site that was part of Willow Creek's roots. To her surprise, Noah showed up, accompanying his grandfather, who insisted on revisiting the place. As the children ran around and explored the area, Emma noticed that Noah was observing everything with a different look. He didn't say anything, but something in his expression suggested that this place wasn't as indifferent to him as he tried to show. Another unexpected meeting happened during a local festival. Noah, initially reluctant, was eventually dragged by his grandfather to the event. To him, it was just a traditional celebration with little importance, but to Emma, it was one of the most special moments of the year. Amid colorful lights and laughter filling the square, the two found themselves sharing an unexpected moment. When a strong gust of wind knocked down some decorations, Emma went to help, and without realizing it, Noah was already by her side. For the first time, the exchanged glances carried no opposition, but a strange complicity. Noah's resistance began to weaken when, on a cold afternoon, he found Emma sitting alone by the lake, holding a book in her hands with a serene expression. Without thinking too much, he approached. The conversation that unfolded was different from the others. For the first time, Noah didn't talk about business, and Emma didn't mention the town. They simply shared stories and memories. Emma realized that, behind his closed-off demeanor, Noah carried pains that had never been spoken out loud. He, in turn, felt that Emma wasn't just a woman trapped in the past, but someone who truly saw beauty in the things he had forgotten to notice. The change was subtle, but real. What started as a clash of ideas was turning into something deeper. Noah still convinced himself that his stay was temporary, that none of this would change his decision. Emma, on the other hand, was beginning to feel something she didn't want to admit. But fate, as always, still had more twists in store for both of them. The days in Willow Creek continued their course, but for Emma and Noah, something was changing. Small moments began to take on more significance, creating a connection neither of them had planned. One autumn afternoon, Emma visited the town cafe when she noticed Noah sitting alone at one of the tables near the window. He was holding an old photo album, probably brought by his grandfather. Without thinking much, Emma approached, and upon noticing her curiosity, Noah turned the album so she could see. It was filled with images of the cafe over the years, showing not only the history of his family, but also that of the town. There was something nostalgic about the moment, a quiet reminder that time passed, but some things remained. Another significant moment happened when a fierce storm hit the town. Emma was leaving school when she noticed the winds were stronger than expected. As she tried to close the gates, a truck stopped beside her. It was Noah. He didn't say anything, just opened the car door, waiting for her to get in. During the drive, the sound of the rain filled the silence between them, but there was comfort in his presence. When they arrived at Emma's house, the rain was still heavy, and Noah ended up staying a little longer, watching the drops sliding down the window. It was there, between the sound of the storm and the stillness of the moment, that the two realized the barrier between them was shrinking. The cold nights of Willow Creek also brought unexpected moments. During a stargazing event hosted by the town, Emma and Noah found themselves side by side. The clear sky, dotted with lights, seemed endless, and in that moment, all worries seemed small. Noah, accustomed to seeing the world through numbers and decisions, found himself lost in the vastness of that scene. Emma, in turn, realized that, even without words, Noah was allowing her to see a side of him that few knew. On one weekend, one of Emma's students organized an event to raise funds for the school, and to her surprise, Noah showed up to help. He didn't seem comfortable at first, but as the day went on, he ended up getting more involved than he had imagined. It was the first time Emma saw him laugh genuinely, without reservations or worries. In that moment, it wasn't the businessman who was there, but someone who, perhaps unknowingly, was connecting with the town in a way he had long forgotten. Each of these moments, no matter how small, was building something bigger. What had once been just a clash of personalities was now transforming into a silent bond. But Noah still carried his own doubts, and Emma, unknowingly, was beginning to get too close to someone who might soon leave. The afternoon was nearing when Emma and Noah entered the historic cafe in the town center. The place, with its exposed brick walls and aged wooden furniture, had the kind of charm that made people lose themselves in its unique atmosphere. It was a place where time seemed to stop, and the aroma of fresh coffee mixed with that of old books on the shelves around. Emma had spent many afternoons there, and the simple fact that Noah suggested they meet in this setting made her feel that he was starting to understand something about her, something she hadn't yet been able to express. But on that day, the cafe seemed more like a silent observer of a tense moment than a welcoming refuge. As they sat at a table near the window, Emma couldn't help but feel a slight unease. The conversation, which should have been simple and relaxed, seemed to lack a natural rhythm. Noah, though kind and attentive, was restless in a way Emma couldn't understand. His presence, instead of being comforting, was starting to become a reminder of the things she preferred not to face. Their gazes met, but there was something distant in the exchange, as if an invisible wall was beginning to rise between them. Noah, in turn, was trying to find a way to connect with Emma, but his attempt at depth seemed to be met with hesitation. He spoke of plans, of futures that could be shared, but each word seemed to weigh differently on Emma. The mere fact of talking about the future made her uncomfortable. For her, the future was a vague concept, a promise that could be easily broken. Her past, still painful and full of insecurities, stood between Noah's view of the relationship and the reality Emma feared. Noah, though concerned, didn't know what was happening. He felt they were at a turning point, but couldn't identify the cause. He felt disconnected, but didn't understand why. Each attempt to engage her more seemed to be meticulously avoided, as if something in Emma wasn't ready to give in, to open up completely to him. The tension grew without being named, and Emma began to feel a whirlwind inside. The cafe, which had always brought her peace, now seemed to be the perfect setting for the silent misunderstanding that was taking shape between them. It wasn't an open conflict, but a barrier that was quietly rising. Emma, in her mind, began to wonder if Noah truly understood her, if he knew the weight she carried, or if he was just projecting his own dreams onto her. As the conversation continued in an increasingly dull tone, the atmosphere of the cafe seemed to become heavier. The sound of the cups and the murmurs around were muffled by the growing tension that Emma tried to disguise. She didn't know how to put into words what she was feeling, but the sense of being pushed toward a future she wasn't ready to live was intensifying. Noah, as much as he tried, couldn't see how much she was closing herself off, until a small gesture from Emma, a fleeting glance, a muffled sigh, revealed more than she wanted to show. The historic cafe, with its untouched and unchanging beauty, became the stage for an internal struggle that Emma couldn't fully comprehend. She knew something needed to change, but she didn't know if she was ready to open her heart again. Noah, in turn, became more lost in the unspoken parts of the conversation. The afternoon that should have been another in the natural flow of their relationship became a turning point, where the unspoken words became more significant than any sentence they could have exchanged. As the days went by, the connection between Emma and Noah became harder and harder to ignore. However, while Emma began to allow her feelings to grow, Noah struggled with his own. He knew he shouldn't get attached, as his stay in Willow Creek was temporary. A business agreement made months earlier required his return to New York soon, and as much as something inside him hesitated to follow through with that plan, he never truly considered an alternative. But he couldn't tell Emma that. With every meeting, every moment by her side, Noah felt torn. When she talked about the future of the town, the cafe, and how Willow Creek was part of who she was, a knot formed in his throat. He wanted to tell her the truth, to say that in a few weeks he would leave, but he kept postponing it, perhaps out of fear of seeing disappointment in her eyes, or maybe because part of him didn't want to face the reality. The doubt began to affect him in subtle but noticeable ways. His smiles became rarer, and even when he was physically present, his mind seemed distant. Emma noticed the changes, but tried not to jump to conclusions. The days that once seemed light began to carry an invisible weight. Noah started to avoid certain moments that could deepen their bond even further. If he had once made a point to show up at the cafe or help her with school events, now he found excuses to stay away. Emma, in turn, felt this shift, but couldn't understand why. Something inside her told her Noah was hiding something, but she didn't want to believe it was something that could separate them. Meanwhile, the deadline for his departure was approaching, and the truth that Noah had been avoiding was about to become impossible to hide. Over time, Noah could no longer ignore the impact Emma's proximity was having on his life. Every affectionate gesture, every smile from her seemed to intensify the internal conflict he was facing. He knew that soon he would have to return to New York, and with that, leave Willow Creek and Emma behind. The thought of getting even more attached to her, knowing that his departure was inevitable, terrified him. It was then that he began to subtly but perceptibly pull away. He started to miss scheduled meetings, citing urgent business commitments that required his attention. The conversations that once flowed naturally became shorter and more distant. Even when he was present, his mind seemed to be elsewhere, as though he was preparing for the separation he knew was necessary. Emma, on the other hand, sensed Noah's withdrawal, but couldn't understand why. At first, she thought it was just a phase or perhaps stress with the cafe and the family business. But over time, the doubts began to pile up. The answers Noah gave became evasive, and he avoided discussing anything related to the future, especially anything involving the town or the two of them. There were days when Emma tried to talk, seeking to clarify what was happening. But Noah always found an excuse to end the conversation early. He felt guilty for causing her pain, but he believed it was better to keep his distance than to involve her further, only to see her suffer when he had to leave. It was a cycle of self-sabotage that he thought was the only solution to avoid creating expectations that could never be met. Meanwhile, Emma began to notice Noah's changes in behavior. The feeling that something was wrong grew stronger, and she felt more and more powerless to change the situation. It was hard to accept, but her intuition told her that Noah was pulling away to protect her from something he still couldn't share. She wondered what could have happened, but Noah's silence spoke louder than any explanation. Emma's discovery came unexpectedly, like a piece of a puzzle that had always been there but she never knew where to fit. It all began on a cloudy morning when she passed by the town's historic cafe, which Noah had been reluctant to discuss. A group of townspeople was chatting excitedly about recent changes in the town, and Noah's name was mentioned. "I heard he's going to sell the cafe property. He's planning to leave soon after," one of the women said as she walked with her friends. Emma stopped in the middle of the street, her heart racing. She didn't want to believe what she had just heard. The feeling of betrayal hit her immediately. She knew Noah had something in mind, but she never imagined he was actually preparing to leave, without ever mentioning it to her. That moment hit her like a punch to the stomach. She felt foolish for not realizing it earlier, for ignoring all the signs and still believing that there was something real between them. Emma knew she needed to understand the truth. Not knowing exactly what to do, she sought out Noah, but he was as evasive as always. The discomfort between them had become unbearable, but he said nothing. She tried to confront him gently, seeking some plausible explanation, but his avoidance only heightened her anguish. Noah never talked about the future, never mentioned the town or what he planned to do after helping his grandfather. One afternoon, Emma found an envelope forgotten on Noah's desk while he was out. His name was written in elegant handwriting, but the contents of the envelope confirmed what she feared: a contract confirming the sale of the property and Noah's immediate return to New York. Feeling the weight of betrayal, Emma quickly distanced herself from the cafe and ran home, her eyes full of tears. She felt as if she had been deceived, as if all of Noah's affection and attention had been nothing but a facade. The pain of knowing he had kept everything a secret, even though he knew how much she cared, was almost unbearable. She wanted to scream, confront him, but something inside her held her back. Maybe it was the shame of having been so vulnerable, or maybe the fear that the answer she was searching for wouldn't be what she truly wanted to hear. Either way, the truth was there, raw and devastating. The confrontation was inevitable. Emma, with her heart heavy and her mind clouded by the pain of the discovery, could no longer hold back the emotions that were bubbling inside her. The weight of the lie and the bitter feeling of betrayal became unbearable. It didn't take long for her to seek out Noah, determined to finally understand the reason behind everything. When she found him, the setting was different from what she had imagined. It was no longer a calm conversation, but a moment of direct confrontation, filled with frustration and disillusionment. Noah was in the cafe, distracted with some tasks, when Emma entered, her eyes red and full of resentment. She knew she could no longer hide the pain she felt, nor ignore the truth that had cruelly imposed itself. The silence between them was heavy, more than any word could be. She looked him directly in the eyes, the pain reflected on her face. "You never thought I could be more than just a simple distraction? That I deserved to know the truth?" she thought, but didn't say out loud. She was in shock, not knowing what to ask first or which accusation to throw. What she felt was a whirlwind of emotions. Love, hurt, anger, and distrust, all blending into one place. Noah, for his part, felt the weight of Emma's gaze like a burden. He had always known that the secret he carried would eventually come to light, but even so, the weight of the revelation hit him unexpectedly. Seeing Emma so deeply hurt cut him more than any cruel words she could say. But he knew that by not telling the truth, he had caused all of this. He had distanced himself for so long, afraid of hurting her, and now he was paying the price. Emma's anger, for not being treated with honesty, took over her body. Every word she spoke was filled with hurt. She felt as if she had been deceived from the beginning, as if Noah had played with her feelings, and now was about to leave her behind with no remorse. "Couldn't you at least have been honest with me? If I had known the truth, I could have made the choice not to get involved," she thought, with the pain of a broken heart. As the words intertwined in a flow of accusations and justifications, the truth seemed irrelevant. What Emma felt in that moment could not be erased, and what Noah felt seemed irrelevant in the face of the wound he had caused. Noah's sadness was evident, but there was no more room for explanations. He knew the words wouldn't be enough to heal the pain he had caused, nor to restore the trust that was now irreparably broken. The argument ended in an uncomfortable silence. Emma was no longer willing to hear any more promises or apologies, and Noah didn't know what to say anymore. Both were emotionally exhausted. She, feeling betrayed and confused, and he, devastated by the awareness of what he had lost. Noah walked slowly to his grandfather's house, feeling the weight of a decision that hung over him. The cold afternoon wind made the leaves fall, creating a melancholic scene. He knew he could no longer delay the conversation he had been avoiding for days. Emma's words still echoed in his mind, and the feeling of having lost her trust made him feel increasingly lost. When he reached his grandfather's door, he hesitated for a moment before knocking. His grandfather was sitting in his usual armchair, his face marked by time, but his eyes still carrying the wisdom that came from a life of challenges and achievements. The air around the house had something familiar about it, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and aged wood, something that made Noah feel safe, but also uncomfortable, as if it was time to face a truth he had known for a long time. The old man looked at Noah as soon as he entered, as if he already knew what was coming. He had always known that Noah was pulling away, that something inside him was about to break. It wasn't the first time his grandson had struggled with his own heart, and the grandfather, who had lived a life of losses and gains, understood the pain of difficult choices. "I know your heart is heavy," the grandfather said straightforward. He had always known Noah's internal battle, the one the young man tried to hide, but which was as clear as day. "But you need to understand that sometimes love requires sacrifices. It's not something you can control." Noah sat down, feeling the weight of the words, as if they had the power to cut through years of silence and pain. He knew his grandfather was right, but that didn't make the decision any easier. He was at a breaking point. Deep down, he had always believed that he could go on with his life without being tied to what he felt, that he could simply return to the big city and continue with his usual routine. But now, with his heart torn between his life in New York and his love for Emma, things had changed. The grandfather, with a gentle look, told Noah a story he had never imagined hearing. He spoke of a lost love, a sacrifice made by someone who had to leave their beloved to follow a destiny. "I was young once," the grandfather said, "and I made choices that at the time seemed right. But over time, I learned that true love is the one that challenges your own expectations, that leads you to change your life, even when that seems too difficult." Noah listened carefully, the pain of his own choices reflected in his grandfather's words. He had always heard stories about the past, but now, more than ever, his grandfather's life lessons seemed more real and urgent. The grandfather, who had always known life's difficulties, wasn't telling Noah what he wanted to hear. Instead, he was asking him to make a decision that, even though hard, would be sincere. With a deep sigh, the grandfather spoke one last sentence that would echo in Noah's mind for days. "What you have in your hands now might be what you've always sought, but fear can make you lose everything. The choice is yours. But remember, true happiness doesn't lie in running from what's hard." Noah stayed silent for a long time after the conversation. He knew his grandfather was right, but what scared him the most was the idea of letting go of everything he knew. The path ahead seemed uncertain, but as he looked at his grandfather, Noah saw something else. a life full of regrets that he didn't want to follow. Noah was alone in his room, the window open, letting the cool night breeze in, but his heart was warmer than it had ever been. He felt an increasing anguish, a pressure coming from within, something he couldn't shake off. What his grandfather had said still resonated in his mind, but now he needed to make a definitive decision. For a moment, Noah was silent, thoughts rushing through his head. He had come to Willow Creek intending to resolve the issues of the past, but now the town seemed to hold something much deeper. Emma had entered his life unexpectedly, changing everything. He knew what he had to do, but the weight of the decision seemed unbearable. He couldn't deceive himself anymore. For years, he had lived with the belief that career, business, and success in New York would be the only things that kept him in control of his life. And for a time, it worked, but not anymore. Emma, with her kindness and her vision of a simple and beautiful world, had shown him a side of life he never knew he needed. She had shown him that it could be possible to be happy without always being on the move, without always clinging to the perfection he thought was the goal. Happiness wasn't in the big achievements, but in the small joys of everyday life, in true love, in the touch of a hand, in a welcoming smile. However, he knew that by deciding to stay, everything would change. He couldn't simply return to New York and continue his life as it was. His relationship with Emma would mean renouncing what he had built until then, the family cafe, what remained of his legacy, his very identity built over the years. Everything would need to be set aside, and that wasn't an easy choice. The life he had lived up until now wasn't something you just left behind without regret. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the pain of this choice, the fine line between what he knew and what he was beginning to love. It wasn't just Emma. It was Willow Creek. It was the peace he felt when looking at the mountains, when walking through the cobblestone streets, when sitting in the family cafe and hearing the laughter of the locals. It was all of that he was afraid of losing. And then, in the silence of the night, Noah realized what he really wanted. He had run away from the town, run away from the simple life that Emma lived, because he thought it was weak. But now, he saw the truth. Real courage was in opening his heart, in not fearing the vulnerability that love brought. He finally understood that he didn't have to choose between love and his old life. He could have both. He could redefine what success meant. With a decision made, he got up from the chair, his mind clear for the first time in weeks. The life he had before Willow Creek no longer fulfilled him. What he felt for Emma, what he felt for this place, was real, and that was more valuable than anything he had ever achieved. It was time to fight for it. Noah walked down the main street of Willow Creek, the sound of his footsteps softly echoing on the sidewalks covered with dry leaves. The lights from the houses flickered like stars on the horizon, creating a sense of warmth. He had made his choice, and the decision didn't seem as scary as it had before. The anxiety that plagued him was gradually replaced by a feeling of resolution. It was time to act. He looked at the family cafe, the place he now knew he had to save. When he first arrived in Willow Creek, selling the cafe seemed like the solution to all his problems. The cafe had a history, but it was also full of painful memories. Every corner of the place held a part of his past, a part he'd rather leave behind. But over time, he had realized that the cafe was more than just a piece of land or a family business. It was a vital part of Willow Creek, a part of the lives of the people there, and, more importantly, a part of his own journey of self-discovery. As he entered the cafe, Noah felt a mix of emotions. The familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee, the sound of cups clinking, the soft laughter of the customers, all of it gave him a sense of belonging, something he had never thought he needed. He had traveled the world in search of wealth and status, but nothing compared to the coziness and simplicity of that place. His eyes fixed on the old photo hanging behind the counter, an image of his young grandfather smiling beside his grandmother, both with the newly opened cafe. Noah's gaze softened, a wave of gratitude and regret mixing. He felt the weight of his grandfather's expectations on his shoulders, but also the love and strength of that lineage. What his grandfather had created wasn't just a cafe, it was a legacy, a foundation for the community, and he knew that if he decided to go through with the sale, it would disappear. Now, he understood the true value of the cafe. It wasn't about how much he could earn from selling it. It was about preserving a part of himself, and more importantly, preserving something that meant so much to the town, to Emma, and to him. Noah looked out the cafe window, to the square stretching out in front of him. He knew the future there wouldn't be easy. He would have to deal with the debts, the challenges, and the doubts of everyone around him. But it didn't matter. He was ready to face it. He was willing to fight for his new life. And when he finally turned around, something inside him was different. What had once seemed like an overwhelming responsibility was now an opportunity, a chance to rewrite his story and be part of something bigger. The cafe, Willow Creek, and perhaps even Emma were what he needed. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he felt that he now had a purpose. The cafe would be saved, and Noah was finally ready to move forward, no longer running from the past, but embracing what he could become alongside the people who mattered. He had made his choice. And now, everything was about to change. Emma found herself in a deep dilemma, a whirlwind of emotions she didn't know how to process. For so long, she had kept her true feelings a secret, fearing what they might mean for her future. The idea of surrendering to love seemed so distant, as if it was something she could control or even avoid. But with Noah, things had changed. She knew her feelings for him were intense, but she didn't want to admit how much he had affected her. He had left her life for a time, and with that, she began to question whether what they had was nothing more than an illusion. Noah's absence made her question everything she felt, even her ability to trust her own emotions. In the days following Noah's decision to leave, Emma tried to convince herself that she could move on, that she could return to her quiet, surprise-free routine. But the emptiness Noah had left in her life couldn't be ignored. She found herself thinking about him, wondering what he was doing, if he missed her the same way. But more than that, she questioned love itself. Was what she felt real? The afternoons passed slowly as Emma focused on her students' lessons, on school, and on the small everyday tasks. But her heart, though trying to hide, always sought Noah's presence. Every corner she turned, every path she walked in Willow Creek, it was impossible not to remember him, how their eyes met, how the world seemed to stop for a moment when they were together. It was on a cold autumn afternoon, while walking through the town center, that Emma had the realization she had feared. She felt vulnerable, but at the same time, certain that what she felt for Noah was deeper than any resistance she could try to put between them. Love was there, no matter how much she tried to escape from it. She sat on a bench in the park, watching the leaves fall from the trees, and finally accepted what her heart already knew. The love she felt for Noah was not a fleeting fantasy. It was real, something that couldn't be ignored. Emma realized with unexpected clarity that what she had feared was actually what she most desired. Love was a risk, and she could no longer hide from it. With that understanding, the barrier she had built around her heart began to dissolve. Emma knew there was still much to resolve between them, but one thing was clear: she loved him, and that could no longer be denied. She stood up from the bench, her heart a little lighter, determined not to let fear separate her from Noah forever. True love couldn't be ignored, and she was finally ready to face it head-on, regardless of the difficulties the future might hold. Winter arrived in Willow Creek, bringing with it a soft mantle of snow that covered the town like a silent veil. The streets were peaceful, with only the sound of snow gathering on the trees and rooftops. In the town center, Noah's family cafe was busier than ever. He had given his word that he would save it, and not only that, he had decided to make the place a symbol of something more, a symbol of new beginnings and courage to start over. Emma, watching from a distance, felt a sense of peace she had never known. There was something magical about that day. The snow fell gently, covering the surroundings with a fresh, pure layer, and yet, the warmth coming from the cafe seemed to radiate something even deeper. Noah was there, among the tables, talking to the locals and helping restore the spirit of the place he had almost lost. The family cafe was not just a business. It was the beating heart of Willow Creek. He had finally understood the meaning of it all. It wasn't just about business or personal success. It was about the community, about the history he shared with that place, and most importantly, about the love he found in Emma. As Noah approached the window, Emma was there, watching him with a silent smile. She knew that everything they had been through had been a test, of patience, of trust, of faith in one another. But there, in that moment, she knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. They had found each other again, not just as two people who loved each other, but as souls who had finally freed themselves from the weight of the past. Noah looked at her, his eyes searching hers, Without words, he invited her out, and she followed. They both walked slowly through the snow-covered streets, the city lights reflecting on their faces. The silence between them wasn't heavy, but comfortable, like a promise that, despite all the adversities they had faced, they were together, and together was all that mattered. When they reached the town square, Noah took Emma's hand and guided her to a bench under a tree. The cold wind didn't seem to matter, as the warmth between them was enough to warm any heart. The first snow, which had seemed so distant and insignificant before, now symbolized a fresh start for both of them. They sat in silence, simply observing the landscape around them, as if the world had stopped for a moment, allowing them to savor the tranquility and the certainty of what they had achieved. Emma, now with her head resting on Noah's shoulder, felt a peace she never imagined possible. She had chosen love, and now she knew there was no choice more right. The cafe, the place that had almost lost its reason for existing, now became the symbol of everything they had overcome together, and in some way of everything they still had ahead. The future wouldn't be perfect, but by Noah's side, Emma knew there was nothing left to fear. The snow continued to fall, covering everything with a white and pure mantle. And there, in that moment, with the cold of winter around them, Emma and Noah were warmer than ever. The love that had grown between them, unexpected and impossible, was now the greatest lesson of their lives. The lesson that true love is, indeed, possible, even in the most unlikely moments. After the last scene, with the snow still falling gently over Willow Creek and Emma and Noah together, the story continues its course, but their journey lives on in the imagination of those who follow them. If you were moved by this story of love, challenges, and second chances, don't forget to follow our channel. Each video brings more lessons about life, about the power of love, and about how, even in the toughest moments, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. Follow us on our journey of inspiring stories. Leave a like, share with friends who also believe in the power of love, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching narratives. See you in the next video where new stories of life and love await you.